Welcome back, everybody, to your podcast about cars, life lessons through cars. You know, every car tells a story, carslove.com, and it's good to be back. We haven't recorded in a while. I went on vacation. Doug went on vacation. My sister and her family came and visited me. We've spent the past 3 days at the beach, so I sit here sunburned and staring from the fine air-conditioned interior of my house, and I'm looking at my podcasting partner here. Doug, how you doing, pal?
Doing great. Great to be back with you.
Indeed. And we have a tandem here, a couple of guests, which we've never done before. And as I look into their window in our podcasting software here, I see the both of them, delightful couple, Aimee and John Russell, and right between them, figuratively speaking, of course, only beautiful baby blue Fiat that we're going to get into. And but you know what? Take a step back here. The theme today is going to be friends, partners, and people who go way back and have stayed together. It's been an important theme in my life. Indeed, this podcast was really Doug's brainchild, and I've known Doug, college pal, from I think we're over 30 years into this life together, man. Correct. And when he fired this up, he asked me to be his co-host here, and there's a reason we can finish each other's thoughts and sentences, because when you spend that much time together, there is a shared history, and our guests today have a shared history. But before we talk about them together, I would like Doug to do the proper formal introductions and tie up in a bow how John knows a previous guest of ours, Joe Gibson, whose I believe his episode went up about a month ago. So if you could take me back to how these two gentlemen crossed your paths, Doug.
So it had to be in the mid to late 80s.
Right.
I can't remember if I met these guys in middle school, junior high, back when they had that, or high school, but definitely in high school. And, things got really interesting in high school when we started driving, right? That's when people's personalities really came out.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Joe mentioned that Volkswagen bus, which I do remember. And John, the thing I always remember about John is that he shows up one day with this 4-door convertible Oldsmobile, which they didn't make 4-door Oldsmobile convertibles.
You guys went to a cool high school. Why couldn't I go to a high school like this? This is like 90210 or 21 Jump Street. How can I go back in time and be part of this?
Yeah, and John and Joe and their close friends, I remember seeing them drive in this huge thing, and it was quite the story. Mm-hmm. And John, fortunately, is going to share some of that story with us as we go through some of the cars.
But and I would love for John to step in here, and John, tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then please introduce your lovely wife, Aimee, as well.
Well, hey, Doug and Christian, thanks for having me. My name's John Russell, and I'm here with my wife, and she's the enabler. If she was a superhero, she'd probably be the rearranger, but she's been the best. She's been the best part of my life for over 26 years. 13 of the happiest years of my life. Sorry, that joke never gets old, but
no.
Got old after year 10, but it's okay.
Hey, a flip side to go and
she's quick with a zinger too, ladies.
She's good. Yeah, I got a gang of stuff I can talk to about her. But the thing about Broadneck is Broadneck was kind of a 90210, and I didn't even realize it back then. Mm-hmm. I ended up moving to Florida at the middle of my 10th grade and going to finishing an inner city high school. So I really got to appreciate what we all had up there.
And how did you come to know Joe? John?
Joe was a great story. My wife and I both come from military families. Our dads were both retired Army colonels, so we moved a lot. I had just moved back I'd lived in Maryland, D.C., and moved to another assignment, moved back, and we're at the local crab restaurant, Cantler's Riverside Inn, which is still there. Back in the day, it was still an undiscovered, low-down place. And here I'm belt height. Joe Gibson's a little shorter than I am. You know, we both have bowl cuts, and we're playing video games, and we hit it off. You know, we ran around. Our dad sat at the bar, and we begged for quarters. And the next day, I started in my new school, and there Joe was in my class. So we've been for better or worse best friends for, God, how does that work? 40 years.
Yeah. And before we get into the car part of it, I'm just curious, how often do you guys talk? You're obviously close. But how often do you guys talk a lot over the phone? Do you text a lot? Or is it one of these relationships where there's not a ton of togetherness in that way? Maybe you go months and months without any contact, but you pick up immediately when you do.
No,
how does that work for you guys?
I have those kind of relationships with past friends, but no, Joe and I, man, he's my hetero life mate. We talk regularly. I mean, we might text multiple times a day. Three times a week, and we might pick up the phone and talk for an hour here and there. And we're partners in cars and boats and businesses and you name it. But cars are the real passion.
Indeed, I like that. Thank you. Well, over to you, Doug. Did we get into the sheet metal part of it, or?
Yeah, and I teased out John's car, but first car because I remember it so well, but. Just meeting Aimee, I'd love to hear about Aimee's first car.
Hi, all. I'm Aimee Russell, and I did not grow up in Maryland. So anything that was John before Aimee, we call BA. But my first car was given to my mom by her best friend's husband, and it was about a 70s Chevy.
Early 70s.
Yep.
Okay.
Malibu. And that thing was a beast for a 80-pound, 16-year-old girl in Minnesota with roads.
What color was it?
It was like a goldish, brownish, bronzy.
I call it metallic chocolate.
With a white interior.
Nice.
Yeah, I think GM had to pass. Yeah, go ahead. Good. Yeah.
You remember that color.
Yeah.
I literally would just keep my head on the steering wheel whenever I got into it after work and just pray, please start. And
we've all had a few of those. Absolutely.
Had to put both feet on the brakes at every stoplight and stop sign. Otherwise, I'd just keep rolling right on through and didn't appreciate what I had. So I sold it. And that was my first car. And if I look back at it now and I just kick myself. But I was a 16-year-old girl. I didn't want that kind of car. I wanted, something cool and modern and, automatic.
Right. A convertible Fiat, light blue maybe. Just guessing.
I much appreciation for that later in life once I met John. I also didn't like asparagus or clams or mussels before I met John either. So.
Yeah, see, she didn't grow up in Annapolis, seafood town.
Yep. Yeah, Midwest. Yep, I get it. So with that, since Aimee shared her first car, John, tell us about what you're allowed to tell us and our listeners about that 1973 Olds 98 Custom convertible 4-door.
That was a great first car experience. There was a restaurant that had been closed for many years, just a block from my house. It was getting ready to reopen, and they were paying me $5 an hour to pick up trash. And I worked just long enough to put a $100 bill in my pocket. And pretty much the week of turning 16, Dave Gregory and we rode our bikes to the Annapolis Boat Show. And I don't know if who knows about that show, but it's a very crowded event. People come there for all reasons. And here was this black 4-door Oldsmobile where, the car, they didn't have the B pillars back then. the front windows and the back windows rolled up together. So they'd cut the top off it, but leaving the windshield and the back window, and it had for sale spray painted on the side of it. So, being the brave guy I was, 16 years old, I go into the Fleet Reserve Club, suss the place out, find the barfly owner sitting at the bar, and I said, "Hey, I'm here to buy your car." And he goes, "Well, how much money do you have?" And I go, "I got $100 bill." And he took the $100 bill. He handed me the car keys. He wrote his number down on a bar napkin, and he goes, "Call me in a week." And that's pretty much when the reign of terror began. So we put our bikes in the back of the car. I dropped Dave off, drove straight to Joe's house. In the front foyer of his house was the old credenza where nothing ever moved on it, and was the Doors' greatest hits on an 8-track. And that 8-track went in the player, and Joe and I just caused havoc around, the Broadneck High School region, all fun stuff, knocking over road cones, things like that. But I can still quote every lyric of the Doors' greatest hits because that album played for 2 straight weeks.
The soundtrack of the first car. Absolutely.
Yes. We painted that car up for homecoming. We gave it reverse white walls, where the whites were like stars, Broadneck rules. But it got to the point where when we drove around, you could just see people pointing and read their lips. They were going, "That's the car."
Yes.
And I ended up, I never told my dad about it. I parked it at the neighbor's house, another neighbor I did lawn work for. And, I ended up selling it to a friend, and a friend. Well, he was a friend. He might not have been a friend after that. And can I tell what happened?
Yes, please.
So that night, they went out, and the car had a tag, but no registration, no insurance, and I didn't even have a driver's license at that point. But he got the car. He drove into the high school parking lot at 3 a.m. There was a police officer there. Needless to say, the car got impounded. 3 a.m. The police call my house. My dad wakes me up 3 a.m, says, "Hey, the police are on the phone." So I'm talking to the police about this. No, that's not my car. That car belongs to this other gentleman. So here's his number, if you will. And I hang up the phone, and my dad goes, "What was that about?" I go, "It was the wrong number." that was the end of that story. And my dad, who was pretty iron-fisted military guy, he did when the fellow I sold it to's parents called him the next day and said, "Hey, your son sold my son a car and they got it impounded, and he owes him $150." My dad said, "Well, that's not really how it works. They made a deal. My son made a mistake." And that was like the first time he'd really ever gone to bat for me. So I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Talk about life lessons through cars. The old man had your back. That's pretty fantastic.
He did have my back.
Hey, for those who don't know, the Annapolis Boat Show is a big deal. Down where I live in the Florida Panhandle, people will make a pilgrimage up to Annapolis. It's the boat show for breadth and scope and depth of what's out there. It's really something to be seen. It's quite the event. It's quite the event. Go ahead, Doug. You were going to say something? Didn't mean to jump in. Sorry, you're taking notes. All right. So we saw, what was the second car, or what was the car after that?
From John or Aimee?
Yeah,
I can tell my story. It was a continuation of the Oldsmobile. We named that car the Deathmobile because very similar to Animal House. It was just that kind of car. So I ended up causing enough trouble where my dad said, "Hey, would you like to go live with your mom in Florida?" And I said, "Man, if I'd have known causing trouble would make that happen, I'd have caused a hell of a lot more earlier."
Years ago. Yeah.
So I got straight out of the movies, a complete restart in life. I got a fresh start, fresh high school, and I had my mom and my stepdad, and they said, "Well, John, if you get straight A's, we'll give you $3,000 to buy a car and we'll insure it. If you get straight B's, you can buy your own car and we'll insure it. If you get straight C's, you're on your own. Anything below that, no car, no privileges. I didn't know anybody, and I was going to an inner city school, just to kind of show up and graduate kind of place. So I paid attention in every class, but algebra. I came in as the new kid and I just slept through the class. So I got straight A's and an F in algebra. And my parents go, "What? I don't know what to do about this." And I said, "I got it all covered. I'm going to summer school." So I ended up getting straight A's for the first and only time in my, in my student career, if you would. So my stepdad's retiring. My mom's buying him a brand new Vanilla Ice 5-liter convertible Mustang, and
nice.
he had triple white with a blue interior. I mean, that's another story. But he had a really nice late model Fiat, which is where my affection for these cars come. And it was the 83 that was actually built by Pininfarina. So they gave me this car. So I went from, $100 car to the nicest red, black interior, shiny convertible. And its school, had a good job, made more good friends. And I'll tell you, I had the greatest second round of high school you could imagine.
And that car was legal, right?
And that car,
totally legit.
Totally legal. Yeah, absolutely. and they've pretty much all been since then.
Yes.
Excellent. And so I know you guys being together 26 plus years, right? You mentioned earlier in our talk, or pre-show talk, that you've enjoyed doing road tripping around the U.S. You have some plans to do it overseas as well. But I heard about a very interesting camper that you created, thanks to Joe Gibson again, right? Exchanging cars. And hoping you could tell us about that. The camper, the trip.
Yeah, that was another car that I inherited from Joe Gibson. We've passed back and forth probably close to a dozen cars or boats or something like that in life. So I acquired his 1998 K 2500 diesel Suburban, and we outfitted it into an Expedition camper. I installed a 30-gallon water tank next to the 44-gallon diesel tank. I put a window unit air conditioner in the back door and a disguised box. Another box had a Honda generator, inverter, ice maker, you name it, hot and cold running water. So it was a complete undercover Expedition camper. And we took off and we drove the whole country off grid, whole Pacific Coast Highway. But the fun thing about that car, it's my Joe Gibson voodoo doll, because he seems to remember it being in perfect condition when he sold it to me. And I've since drilled 2,500 screws into it. And every time I put a screw into it, I can just feel him cringe.
Yes, he forgets that it's a can of bottom paint, I think, or something that spilled in the back.
Battery acid. But it was it still have it. It's been a great truck. And, that truck has that kind of bastardized Detroit diesel. It started as the 6.2 and then it went to a 6.5 turbo. So it doesn't have the performance of like a 5.9 Cummins or a Duramax or, a Super Duty Ford. But it's, when those cars, it's a good car. And I'll start it in the morning, sub-zero temperature. And just last week, I towed a car down from Maryland, and the truck ran for 21 hours straight. I don't shut it down. Once it starts up, you run it until you're done driving it for the day. And that's how we went across the country.
Yep.
Nice. And that was a couple weeks, right?
Well, we did it in 10 weeks. We got a case of the stupids. It had been raining up the Pacific Coast Highway, and we'd made it across the country. We stood on the beach in California looking at Mexico. We drove the entire Pacific Coast Highway up, looked at Canada from Washington, and now we were heading back east. And we said, for some reason, we came home, and we got home and we looked at each other and go, "What have we done?" So But
we just kept saying the next spot's going to be prettier. The next spot's going to be even greater. And it was, but then we should have stopped.
It was just a tasty. We were saying, well, when we come back, we'll do it again. And, life goes. We haven't made it back since we went back to work.
We did do a pretty decent trip last July for my 50th birthday. And it was great and nice and wonderful. And of course, the last spot we found was so ideal and so perfect. And we were only going to stay a day and we wanted to stay 2. We were low on gas for the truck. We were low on diesel for the truck, low on gas for the generator, low on food, low on water. But
mainly low on beer.
And mainly low on beer. So we came home, but we've had some amazing trips in that truck and we
lived a pretty good lifestyle. We've stayed in hotel rooms that would make James Bond blush, but we've had a better time in life off-grid living in a truck than living on a super yacht or in some fancy hotel.
And we were in Utah, I think, somewhere, and this kid comes we're at the gas station filling up and everything. He comes in, he's like, "Is that a diesel Suburban?" And he was in a nice truck too. And we're like, "Yeah, it is." And John and him are talking. He's like, "Oh man," he goes, "I'd love to get that thing." We're like, "Yeah, we're far from home, so sorry." But it's nice to appreciate. I had 2 young kids at Lowe's about 2 weeks ago. I drive a 2001 Oldsmobile Aurora, and the symbol on the hood is, different. And this kid grabbing carts, he's like, "What kind of car is that?" I'm like, 2001.
You're kidding.
Aurora. And he's like, "Oh," he goes, "I thought I knew all the emblems."
Hey, that's another story that rubs Joe.
He mentioned that car to me, and most people don't know what that is. I do, but
that car, I'm at probably 75 cars now, last count over the course of my life, 13 and a half right now, one being a partnership with Joe. And that Oldsmobile Aurora, I bought it when my 84 diesel Suburban got stolen another truck I had.
Okay.
And that's a great story I should have mentioned earlier. But I found myself looking for a 5-year-old, fully depreciated $30,000 sedan to have a, kind of a professional car, if you will. This was in 2005. And, the BMW 5 Series and Lincolns and Lexus, they were all in there. And I bought this car, $5,000, 50,000 miles, 5 years old. And
in 2005,
I'm still driving it 20 plus years later. It looks like new, and it's cost nothing but brakes, tires, and oil. So anybody that wants to give us grief about that particular car, Joe, it's been the greatest car I've ever owned. I just drove it miles last weekend.
Yeah, that was a neat experiment, if you will. Oldsmobile trying to be different. Front wheel drive V8.
It had a terrible reputation at first because all the other cars seemed to way outclass it, but it's aged really well. My particular one has the 3.5 liter V6, which the only GM I know of that's the 6-cylinder version of the North Star.
Okay.
So that's the only one that they did that to, kind of like a 4.3 is a 6-cylinder 350.
Yep. No, I didn't realize they had V6s. I only knew about the 8. But no, that's you guys have it. So Aimee, we were talking earlier. So you did mention your Malibu and you got rid of it, and I love the story about what your second car and what happened to it, and it was really a family story.
It is. Mazda 626. I want to say it was 1985. It was a manual, red with black interior, 4-door, aftermarket AC, aftermarket cruise control. And we drove that car as a family down to Oklahoma or Alabama to visit our family because we never flew anywhere. So it was my sister got to drive it. She's 2 years older than me. And when she went to college, it became my car. Only one of my friends that knew how to drive a stick.
Stick shift.
Car. So I always said, if anything happens to me, you guys are screwed.
Yep.
My best friend still does not know how to drive a manual, but I was driving a friend to the airport. He was joining the Army, and I slid into the back of a truck in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yep. and it didn't puncture the radiator. The tow truck tied the roof down, or the hood down, and I made it home. And my father had some issues, but said, I'm going to have the mechanic look at it. And if it didn't hit the radiator, then we'll fix it. It didn't. So it got fixed. And the day my sister was leaving to go to Czech Republic to teach English in college, I was coming back from depositing my check from work in the bank, going over the highway, and every single light lit up on the dash. And I just
went, Christmas tree.
Oh, crap. Yeah.
Christmas in July.
Well, I wish it was July. It wasn't. It was December. And it was cold, and I had to walk about a mile to a sketchy 7-Eleven.
Oh.
Payphone to call my dad. And
before cell phones, everyone.
He came out with the Ford truck, and he was literally in a snowsuit. And I was actually in a skirt, and jacket, everything. He put me in the cab of the truck, and I towed him home in that car. It was about 3 miles, and he said it was the worst 3 miles of his whole entire life. He said every time I put a fist out, and it's dark in Minnesota at this time, at 4:00 at this time, it was maybe 5:36. My sister's at home, her boyfriend, his family, my family, they're all saying goodbye because she's leaving that night to fly out, and car's got to break down on me.
And can I remind you guys or bring this up that her father was an infantry officer in Vietnam and saw a lot of action. So for him to say it was the scariest 3 miles of his life,
saying something right there
is really saying something.
Let's just say I told you not to go above 10 miles an hour, and I swear I didn't. But
look, I'll be honest, when I met Aimee, she was not the greatest driver in the world, but I'll tell you, she is now. She's, didn't grow up flying, can now fly jet aircraft, merchant marine officer, ship captain, and she's a great driver these days.
So we started with cars, through planes, through boats, through the boat show, but that kind of brings us around to the lighthouses. Now, I know this show is called To All the Cars I've Loved Before, not To All the Lighthouses I've Loved Before. But I was so taken when y'all were telling us about the lighthouse. Please tell us about how a lighthouse came into your life. I find this so interesting.
And Joe Gibson's part of this story too.
Yeah. He's everywhere.
There's the car.
He's everywhere.
Well, it goes like this. You'll never meet anybody that doesn't like train cabooses, dolphins, and especially lighthouses. So in the region we're from, Annapolis, Maryland, there's a number of fairly famous lighthouses. One of them being the Baltimore Lighthouse, and it's sat abandoned's not quite the right word, but unused, if you will. And it had a neat history. It actually had an experiment in the 60s. It had a SNAP 7 Bravo strontium 90 60-watt isotopic atomic generator installed in the basement of it, about the size of a 55-gallon drum of water that would weigh 700 pounds, if you will. This generator weighed 5,000 pounds in a 2-inch iron box. So this abandoned lighthouse, in view of Joe Gibson's family house, something I'd rent a boat from the Navy. He had a little boat. We'd go out and we'd do 100 turns around it every summer. And Joe and I, as 12-year-olds, would sit back and we'd go, wouldn't it be cool if one day I got word that it was coming up on a government auction, and short story long, I ended up winning the auction. And then I thought about who would be a good fit. So Joe Gibson had the waterfront property, and he's the go-getter, can fix anything. He's got a set of tools that'll make any mechanic blush. Our other friends, Mark and Jane, they're involved with another local lighthouse, and she's involved with Maryland Historical Society. And then, of course, you need a lawyer, and that's our good friend Ron. So they came in, and we basically kept equal shares for everybody. It's a little bit different, and our mission is to restore, preserve, and enjoy this local lighthouse. So that's BaltimoreLighthouse.org, if I can plug that.
Yep.
If you ever have a spare second and want to get in some trouble, the Lighthouse was for sale at auction on the GSA.gov website. And you at one time could buy a whole town on that website.
Yeah, you can buy a Navy base.
Yeah.
You can buy a Ranger station. You can buy space shuttle parts. You can
Still now? You can do this.
GSA auctions, General Service Administration. That'll get you.
Love it.
But if you want to buy a cargo van, it's there. If you want to buy an airport fire truck, it's there. If you want to buy
what was that one boat we looked at? It was a
landing craft. I'm not allowed on this website anymore for obvious reasons.
Yeah, we got to keep you locked up in the garage. You're trouble, mister. Yeah.
Well, so sorry, Christian. Question. Can you buy some of the cars that we see in your garage behind you on that website?
Oh no.
Well, everything's for sale.
Perfect.
Oh, you're my cars are for the select few. My joke has always been, some guys want to drive around in a $50,000 car. I'd rather have $5,000 cars than I do. And that's what I like, Fiat, classic Fiats, Datsuns. I'm a 1972, so I gravitate toward 72. It was a good car year. It's kind of the last of the no emissions, horsepower war cars, less safety regulation. And then going to high school, in the late 80s, early 90s, that's this, the same year. So all of my cars are early 70s or late 80s, early 90s. And that's just what I like.
Good choices. So can you give us a brief tour of your garage for our listeners? They can't see it, but hopefully we'll put some pictures of your cars up online.
Okay. Well, I'm looking
the cars we see, not all of them.
Right now, I'm looking at my favorite car, and it's my 1972 Fiat 124 Spider, Russo red, black interior, with everything you'd ever want to bolt onto one of these cars. So it has a hot cam, has a stainless header, has an ANSA exhaust, has a Weber carburetor, has Coney shocks, it has Panasport wheels. So it runs great, it sounds great, it drives great, but I'd be nervous to leave the county in it. Next to it is my 240 Datsun. I had one of these in high school. I bought this not long ago, and to convince the wife to let me buy this car, I told her, I said, honey, she goes, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to ship it to Europe, and we're going to put 2 backpacks in it. And we're going to backpack through Europe without any walking. And she goes, okay. So she let me buy the car, and it's very original. It has every nick and scratch. It's red on red. And I drive it to California. Then behind me is a 73 Fiat that I bought from Joe Gibson's brother not long ago. I just trailered it down from Maryland. And it's the parts car for my car. But when I'm done with it, I don't want to take it off the road. So it's going to be a rat rod. It's going to be a rat rod race car in the full Colin Chapman treatment. And I don't know if you guys know, which viewers know, but he was famous with Lotus, and his motto was add lightness. So yep. I'm taking everything off of it. The door panels, all the glass, the windshield. I'm going to put a low cut windshield on it, the spare tire. And I want it just to be as absolutely light and clean as possible. Just, 1, maybe 2 seats on it if my wife wants to hang out. Then I've got a beloved 82 Fiat, similar to the one I had in high school. I bought it for my wife as a present. She wanted a convertible when my GTV 6 Alpha burned up on me on the Skyway Bridge. We recently stripped the original purple paint. Well, the car had been repainted by the eclectic first owner purple, and 20 years into the ownership, we decided to restore it. We stripped the paint down to bare, and the paint change, the heavy refresh turned into more of a restoration. It's come out really nice. 40,000 miles.
Beautiful.
And it drives as good as it looks. It drives like brand new. And then across from it is an 81 black Fiat Spider, which is a unique one. It's fuel injected and it has an automatic transmission. That automatic transmission is a Chevy 200, I believe, which you might have seen in a Chevette. But a lot of the European cars with automatic transmissions, use GM transmissions. Jaguar was a big person. And the sad thing is it's become the parts car on the 82's registration, but it's actually the nicest car in the whole fleet. It's 40,000 miles. The spare tire still wrapped in plastic. There's Cosmoline on it. It's just a really clean car. So it's black with the red interior that it's about to get from the 73. So I'm going to have a black one with a red interior, a red one with a black interior, and then we're going to have the 82 that's restored to look like new, and then a 73 ratty race car. So that's not the collection I ever dreamed about, but that's the way it's worked out, and it's got a story.
Yeah, you're smiling as you're describing it, and thank you for the tour of the garage. And I will say, if there was ever two people made for each other, it's you and Aimee. And
thank you.
I just think it's wonderful. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to get to know you here. And thank you for bringing us into your world for half an hour and sharing, the stories of your past, what makes each of you, what makes you tick. And I think you should patent. I'd rather have, $5,000 cars than one $50,000 car because I think a lot of us can relate to that. And also, when you reach back into your past, there are these beautiful cars that don't mean a whole lot to anyone else from this generation, but something that just inspires youth, sparks the memories of
stories.
Your youth, and there's stories of family, of the people, of the friends, and that's all wonderful.
The Fiats to me were always the poor man's Ferrari. They have Lampredi engines. He designed, the famous Colombo V12s. They were designed by Tom Jarda. He designed some of the beautiful Ferraris at 330. So when I look at it, I see a $1 million Italian exotic. But,
well, you definitely have a type, as they say. And again, it was wonderful meeting you both. Thank you for being on the show. We'll have to have you back. And this show is a bit of a curveball for us. So interviewing two people at once and then having the wide-ranging conversation that we did, it really kept Doug and me on our toes. And so we appreciate the challenge. We appreciate your time. Can't wait to further the conversation, have you back, maybe even meet you in person. And thanks for being part of the show. We appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
We're excited to have you interested in our story. So thanks a million.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you again. Good reconnecting with you, John, after all these years as well.
Excellent. Well, I'll run into you for sure. Small world, though.
Yeah. Next time you're in Annapolis, Easton, let me know.
Definitely.
Yep. All right.
Take care.
Thanks.
This was To All the Cars I've Loved Before. CarsLove.com. Check us out on your podcast streaming platform of choice. Reach out to us. I'm Christian at CarsLove.com. He's Doug at CarsLove.com. We'll see you next week. Next time. Have a great summer. See you in the fall.
See you soon.